Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. My name is Wesley Brooks. I'm 37 years old and hold the rank of Major General in the United States Army. Some know me as a cybersecurity genius. Others don't know me at all, and that's how it should be. But as I stand here now, staring at my reflection in the gilded mirror of this hotel suite, I don't see any of those titles or accolades. I see a man in a plain black suit, trying to remember what it feels like to belong to a family. I never like talking about myself. My job has always been to keep secrets, not to share them. But if you really asked, I keep it brief. I graduated at the top of my class from West Point. I went on to earn a master's in cybersecurity from Johns Hopkins, then received an honorary doctorate from MIT. That one caught me off guard. I didn't even attend the ceremony. I've led international cyber operations like Sentinel Fire. You've probably never heard of it. That's the point. I founded the Ghost Grid Unit, a team that doesn't exist on paper but has stopped threats that would have turned nations upside down. I've testified before Congress, behind closed doors. I've been recognized by NATO for operations that will never make it into any headline. That's the nature of what I do, things that happen in the shadows to protect the light. Now, I serve as Director of Cyber Strategy Integration and Defense Relations at the U.S. Army Cyber Command. In plainer words, I lead the Army's cybersecurity operations. I oversee defense contracts worth billions of dollars, coordinating with allies, agencies, and companies most people will never hear about. And yet, no one in my family knows this. To them, I'm just Wes, the eldest son, the one who left, the one they think chose to be a low-ranking soldier, wasting his potential. I stand in front of the Grand Elysium Hotel, a towering 5-star fortress of glass and marble that practically glows in the late afternoon sun. Today, it hosts my younger brother Brandon's wedding. The place looks more like a palace than a hotel. Pristine white marble columns line the facade, while inside, crystal chandeliers sparkle like constellations, casting fragments of light across velvet walls. A red carpet stretches from the curb to the main hall entrance, and the sound of jazz music floats softly into the evening air, mingling with the clink of glasses and murmured laughter of high society guests. I take a breath, then another. My fingers reach up to adjust my tie, clean black silk, and I feel the familiar coolness of my West Point ring press against my skin. It grounds me, reminds me of the promise I made to my mother long ago. "Promise me you'll be there for your brother's big day," she'd said. Her voice had cracked just slightly over the phone, a rare show of emotion from her. "Even if you're halfway around the world." "I'll be there, Mom," I told her. And now I am. Even though it's been nearly 10 years since I last came home. 10 years since I left the glossy, sculpted world of my family to live in bunkers, in concrete-walled data centers, in the quiet hum of server rooms, and under the fluorescent buzz of classified briefings. 10 years of choosing what mattered to me over what was expected. My family isn't ordinary. Nothing about them ever has been. My father, James Brooks, is the CEO of Nixora Dynamics, a behemoth of a tech conglomerate. Their footprint stretches through every sector that matters, and their influence is far-reaching. They supply software and equipment to the defense, healthcare, and finance industries. He's a tall man, my father, with salt and pepper hair and a posture that commands attention even in silence. Always in tailored bespoke suits. Always carrying that air of effortless power. Natural authority clings to him like cologne. James Brooks doesn't need to raise his voice. His presence alone bends a room to his will. Beside him is my mother, Helen. Graceful, quiet, but don't mistake that for weakness. She's sharper than most men in the room, her intelligence tucked behind gentle smiles and perfectly timed nods. She's always been his closest advisor, the one who knew how to steer storms without touching the wheel. And then there's Brandon, my younger brother, CFO of Nixora Dynamics. A younger, sleeker version of our father, minus the gray. He has the same quick mind, the same ambition in his eyes. The kind that devours rooms and leaves people wondering how they ever said no to him. Brandon knows how to charm, how to make everyone feel like they matter until they don't. They are giants in the eyes of others. The architects of a billion-dollar empire. Leaders. Visionaries. And me? I'm the one who said no. The one who turned down the family legacy and chose a path none of them would ever understand. I could have been rich. I could have had a corner office, a private jet, a face on the cover of Forbes. Instead, I chose server rooms and secure lines. Silence and service. I step into the banquet hall, and it hits me all at once. The scent of perfume, heavy, expensive. The glint of diamonds. The rustle of silk. The clink of wine glasses echoing off the high ceilings. Over 300 guests, dressed like royalty, laughing like the world belongs to them. A young woman in a hotel uniform approaches me. "Good evening, sir. May I see your invitation?" I offer it to her with a quiet nod. She checks it, scans the list, and smiles politely. "You're at table 17, she says, gesturing toward a far corner of the vast hall. "Thank you," I reply, and start walking. But the number hits me like a slap. Table 17. Not near the stage. Not near the family. Not even near the center. Just a small island in the back where the nobodies go. I try to brush it off, but a sharp pang cuts through my chest. It's not surprising. I told myself not to expect more. But still, it feels like someone just slipped a knife in quietly and twisted it a little, just for the sting. As I move through the room, I feel eyes tracking me. Not many, just enough to notice. A cousin I barely recognize. An old family friend. A few strangers in tailored suits. They nod, some smile. Polite. Distant. Like seeing a ghost you're not sure is real. That's Wesley, the eldest Brooks' son. I hear a woman whisper behind me, just low enough for her friend to catch it, just loud enough for me to hear. "They say he's still in the military," the other replies. Such a shame. With that mind, he could have done so much more. I don't flinch. I've been called worse. I just keep walking, pull out a chair at table 17, and sit. The others at the table barely register me. They're deep in a conversation about interest rates and real estate bubbles. One man's boasting about his new condo in Miami. Another's making predictions about AI and finance. They glance at me, smile, and then turn back to their world. I sip from my water glass, its condensation cold against my fingers. But the bitterness on my tongue isn't from the drink. It's from something else. I look toward the stage. Brandon is standing there, glowing in a perfectly tailored black tux. One arm around his bride, Erin, blonde, radiant, poised. The kind of beauty that photographs well, but still feels warm in person. Her smile is genuine. I can tell. Brandon laughs at something our father says, the kind of hearty laugh that carries to the back of the room. James stands beside him, raising a glass, delivering some toast, no doubt, filled with pride and legacy and vision. The whole room leans toward them. Magnetic. The Brooks. The successful. The admired. The ones who made it. I stare, unmoving. I take another sip. The taste is still bitter. My mind drifts to memories. Long before the medals, before the secrets, before the distance. Brandon and I were close once. Not just brothers, but partners in crime. We grew up in a sprawling house in suburban Virginia, the kind with white shutters and stone pillars, where every summer felt like a movie. There was a wide, green lawn that stretched endlessly under our bare feet, and a sparkling blue pool. Our father always taught us about integrity, about honor, about living in a way that upheld the Brooks name. "You must do what's right, no matter how hard it is," he would say over dinner, his tone firm but never cruel. His eyes sharp, focused, would lock on us across the long mahogany table, polished to a mirror-like shine. Back then, I believed him. I believed in those values with the kind of unwavering faith only a son can have. So when the time came, I didn't hesitate. I chose West Point. I chose the Army. I chose the harder path because I thought he'd see it the same way I did, as something noble, something worthy of pride. But I was wrong. I still remember the day I told him. His expression shifted, as though I had told him I planned to disappear. "The Army," he said, voice low and tight. Not angry, worse. Disappointed. "You want to spend your life in barracks? Earning pennies? When you could be in a corner office overlooking the TOAC?" I stood my ground, but inside, it felt like the earth beneath me had given way. Brandon was there too. 18 years old. Cocky, clever, still finding his place in the world, but already knowing exactly how to please our father. He stood just behind Dad, leaned on the stair rail, and gave a lopsided grin. "If you want to play hero, go ahead," he said with a shrug, his tone half joking, half serious. From that moment on, the space between us only grew. I poured myself into the Army, into the mission. From grueling field exercises and tactical studies at West Point, to sleepless nights hunkered down in Pentagon server rooms, lines of code swimming in my vision. I moved up fast. Captain, Major, Colonel, and by 36, I wore the stars of a Major General, one of the youngest to achieve that rank. I led Operation Sentinel Fire, a mission that stopped a devastating cyber attack from a hostile foreign state. Millions of classified records, identities, and infrastructure assets were seconds from compromise. We stopped it. I founded Ghost Grid, an elite cyber warfare unit. Our operations never made the news, but they shaped the very balance of global power. I sat before Congress, fielding questions no civilian ever wants to think about. I received a NATO medal in Brussels for a classified joint strike operation. I sent the invitation to that ceremony home. Silence. No reply. Not from Dad. Not from Brandon. Occasionally, my mother would call. Her voice warm, but always carrying the same note. "When are you coming to work for the company, Wesley?" she'd ask. My father was more blunt. "When you're done playing soldier," he once said, "just let me know." Now, I scan the banquet hall. The lights shimmer across champagne flutes. Cheers erupt as Brandon and Aaron cut into their wedding cake. The cameras flash, freezing their perfect smiles in time. I smile too, but inside, something rages. A quiet, constant storm. I'm not angry at them anymore. That faded years ago, but the wound remains. Small, deep, reopened each time I hear someone murmur that I'm the lowly soldier of the Brooks family. The wasted mind. The black sheep. They never ask why I chose this. They never stopped to consider that I could have joined the empire, stood shoulder to shoulder with them. But I didn't. Not because I couldn't, but because I believed in something else. In duty. In service. In a life of value measured by something more than numbers and shares. I don't need the applause. But sometimes, I wish the silence weren't so loud. Just then, I notice movement in my peripheral vision. A man in uniform, army dress blues, polished boots, crisp lines approaching my table with purpose. I turn. Colonel Mark Reynolds. Ghost grid. We've spent more nights chasing cyber ghosts than I can count. I haven't seen him in nearly a year. He stops in front of me, straightens, and offers a salute sharp enough to slice the air. "Major General Brooks," he says, voice steady, eyes full of respect. "It's an honor to see you here, sir." He says it, his voice carrying over the noisy room, rising above the clink of crystal and bursts of laughter, and a few heads turn, curious. A hush, subtle but sharp, falls over the nearby tables. I stand, shake his hand, and smile. "Mark, it's been a while. Still doing all right?" I ask, keeping my tone light, casual, the way I always do when in uniform among civilians. He nods, the admiration in his eyes unmistakable. "Fit as a fiddle, sir. And you? I heard you wrapped up a major project with NATO." I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. "Today, I'm just a guest, Mark. No work. Just family." He nods again, salutes quickly, and disappears back into the crowd, his presence like a quiet ripple in the smooth surface of the evening. But the ripple lingers. As I sit back down, I feel the shift in the room, not large, but enough. From a nearby table, a woman, probably one of my mother's friends, leans toward her companion. I catch just enough of her hushed voice to hear. "Major General? Must be a mistake. Wesley, a general? No way." I don't respond. Just take another sip of water. The glass is cool in my fingers, the liquid even colder down my throat. I don't need to explain anything. Not tonight. In exactly 1 week, at Nixora Dynamics headquarters, I'll be sitting across from my father and Brandon in a boardroom they won't expect me to be in, at a meeting they never imagined I'd be a part of. And I won't need to say a word. My rank, my record, my uniform, the authority I've built, earned, bled for, they'll speak louder than anything I could say. The wedding carries on around me, dances swirl across the floor, speeches rise and fall, and toasts flow with wine. I sit quietly, almost forgotten, watching from the shadows like I always do. Then my father steps onto the stage. He raises a glass. His voice is clear, practiced, commanding, like a man used to being listened to. "My son," he begins, "an exceptional man, has taken Nixora Dynamics to new heights." I couldn't be prouder. Applause follows. Loud, earnest, full of admiration. I join in, clapping politely. But inside, a flicker of something. Not jealousy, not even resentment. Just emptiness. Would he say the same about me if he knew? If he understood? If he realized the boy who walked away from the family empire had become someone far more than the lowly soldier they all assumed? He keeps going, his voice filling the hall, expansive and grand as he speaks of Brandon's success, his dedication, his leadership. And I quietly stand, slipping out unnoticed, weaving through the crowd as the spotlight remains on stage. Outside, the balcony welcomes me like an old friend. The city stretches beyond, vast and dazzling, its lights flickering like artificial stars. I breathe in the night air. Cool, sharp, grounding. I lean against the railing, my gaze lost in the skyline. I'm not here to prove anything. I'm here because I made a promise to my mother that I'd show up for Brandon's big day. That no matter the distance, I'd be present. Because despite everything, I still love them. Even if they don't understand me. Even if they never truly tried. But deep down, I know tonight is only the beginning. In a week, everything will change. And I won't need to shout. I won't need to blame. I'll let the truth do what it always does, reveal itself. I reach into my pocket, pull out my phone, and open an old email. It's still there. The invitation I sent them for the NATO medal ceremony. 3 years ago. No reply. Not even a message saying they were proud of me. Just silence. I stare at it for a long moment, then give a small, sad smile. A familiar one. I turn off the screen, slide the phone away, and step back inside. The night stretches on. The music continues, and the laughter of elite guests follows me down the hallway. But I don't stay. I leave quietly, unnoticed, as the chandeliers begin to dim and the final glasses of wine are poured. My shoes echo against the marble floor as I walk out. Outside, my breath mingles with the cold air. The city remains radiant. But inside is something else. Not rage. Not even bitterness. Just that same emptiness. A quiet, smoldering sadness. Like an old wound being prodded. I'm not angry at my family truly. I'm not. I've had years to process it. Years of silence, of missed holidays, of unopened emails and unacknowledged invitations. I've learned to accept that they don't understand me. They never really have. They don't understand the path I chose, the weight of my decisions, the purpose behind every step I took away from their world. But what hurts, what still aches like an old bruise, is the way they see me. A failure. A 37-year-old man who, in their eyes, never grew up. A man still chasing some abstract sense of duty in the military, while my father and brother bask in boardrooms, wine tastings, and industry galas. They call me the lowly soldier, as if I've spent the last decade polishing boots in a dusty barracks and waiting for a government paycheck. They don't know. They don't want to know. They don't know I'm a major general. Don't know I command forces, shape cyber doctrines, and hold the authority to approve or reject defense contracts their corporation covets, pursues, depends on. And I'm not going to say anything. Not yet. I step into a taxi, the driver glancing back at me through the rearview mirror, but saying nothing. I give him the address. My parents' estate. The ride is quiet, the city passing by in streaks of light and shadow. By the time we reach the house, the moon is high and silver. The estate looms ahead, exactly as I remember it. A mansion nestled in the suburbs like a silent monument to wealth and power. The gates are tall, wrought iron and finely detailed with our family crest at the center. The front lawn is trimmed to perfection, hedges shaped like sculptures, the pool in the backyard shimmering under moonlight like a silver mirror. I pay the fare and step out. The air here is colder, quieter. When we were kids, we lived in a modest 2-story house on Birch Lane. Wooden porch, peeling paint. But after Nixora Dynamics skyrocketed, this estate became the new symbol of their name. I walk up the steps. My shoes echo across the marble as I open the front door. Wesley. I turn. It's Clara, the housekeeper. Same warm face. A few more lines around her eyes, but still the same gentle tone in her voice. It's been so long, she says, stepping forward. I smile. Too long, Clara. She reaches out, touches my arm with the kind of affection that only those who remember you from your best days can give. And deep down, I realize, her welcome might be the only warmth I find here. The living room hasn't changed. Still grand, still cold. Soaring ceilings, glass chandeliers, velvet furniture. The walls lined with expensive paintings, abstracts, landscapes, even a few originals by well-known names. It feels more like a gallery than a home. I pause near a tall ebony shelf. Picture frames line it, their silver edges gleaming beneath soft recessed lights. My father, standing with Brandon at a tech conference in Tokyo. Brandon at Wharton, accepting his MBA in cap and gown. My father again on the cover of Forbes, arms crossed, the headline, Pioneer of the Future. Frame after frame, smile after smile. But not one of me. Not a single photo. Not a single medal. No sign of the eldest Brooks' son, the one who didn't take the office, who chose to serve, to lead, to protect. I remember sending my mother a framed photo once from my promotion ceremony. Me in full dress uniform, shaking hands with a NATO general, the American flag bright behind us. I thought maybe that it would mean something. She never mentioned it. Never hung it. Maybe she thought it didn't match the decor. Maybe she just didn't know where it belonged. I crossed the room to a dusty corner. There, half forgotten, half hidden, sits an old photo. The glass is a little fogged, but I recognize it instantly. Our family. I'm 10. Brandon's 6. We're at a park. My father has his arm around my shoulders. My mother is holding Brandon's hand. We're all smiling, sun in our faces. It was the summer we drove cross-country. The last summer before things changed. I touch the frame, brushing a bit of dust away. The warmth from that day flickers faintly in my chest. Back then, my father used to sit me down, speak with gravity. Wesley, he'd say, you have to be a man who stands tall. Even when the world turns its back. Do what's right, no matter how hard it is. His eyes would shine then, not with pride, but with hope. I believed him. I lived by those words. Held them like a compass through every challenge. But now he's the one who looks at me like a failure. I hear footsteps approaching, soft but deliberate. Then my mother appears at the doorway. She's wrapped in a pale silk robe, her silver hair catching the warm light of the hallway behind her. She's aged, more delicately than I remember, but still elegant, still composed. "Wesley, you're back early?" she asks, her voice gentle, familiar, but there's hesitation there too, like she isn't sure how welcome I'll feel here. I nod and smile. "Yes, Mom. The wedding was beautiful, but I'm a bit tired." She steps forward, wraps her arms around me in a brief, perfumed hug. Then, almost immediately, she pulls back and steers the conversation elsewhere. "Brandon was wonderful, wasn't he? Erin's such a lovely girl. They'll be so happy." I nod again, politely, but a thought flickers through my mind, unspoken and sharp. "Do you ever think about my happiness, Mom?" I don't ask. No point. Instead, I head upstairs to the guest room, once my old room, though it's been remodeled beyond recognition. It's spacious now, sterile, like a hotel suite. A large bed sits under the window that looks out over the pool, glimmering in the dark. I sit down on the edge of the bed and open my suitcase. Inside, beneath folded clothes, I pull out a thin manila folder classified Project Helios. The very defense contract Nix Aerodynamics is aggressively bidding on. I skim through it, highlight a few items, and jot a note in the margins. Then I close it, slide it into a secure case, and tuck it back beneath my things. In a week, I'll be sitting in the boardroom at Nix Aerodynamics. Not as a son, not as a brother, but as Major General Wesley Brooks, the one with final say over the fate of Project Helios. But not now. Not tonight. Tonight, I just want sleep. I want to forget the smirks and glances from the wedding, the whispers, the quiet dismissal wrapped in polite smiles. The next morning, I wake early. Old habits. I lace up my shoes and jog around the estate grounds, the air cool and crisp. Birds stir in the hedges, and dew glistens on the trimmed grass. But my mind stays heavy, looping back to my father's voice, the wedding, the woman who didn't believe I was a general. By the time I return, the sun has risen above the trees. I step into the kitchen, towel around my neck. The scent of toast and eggs wafts in the air. My father sits at the long dining table, reading the Wall Street Journal, one leg crossed over the other, perfectly pressed slacks, his gold watch glinting. He looks up briefly, nods. "Wesley." His tone is flat, clipped. "Sit. Have breakfast." I pull out a chair and sit across from him. My mother is already moving, placing a plate in front of me with a soft, practiced smile, eggs, toast, a few slices of fruit. She doesn't speak. The room is quiet, but for the clink of silverware. My father doesn't look up from his paper. "What did you think of the wedding?" he asks finally, still scanning the business section. I swallow a bite of toast. "It was beautiful." Brandon looked happy. He nods, folding the paper with slow precision. Then he finally looks up, eyes meeting mine. "And you?" he asks, pausing. "Still working in the military?" There's something in his tone, not exactly disdain, but confusion, as if he still can't make sense of the choice I made. I smile faintly. "Yes, still there." That's all I give him. No details. No rank. No mention of NATO. No ghost grid. No long nights spent decoding threats most civilians will never even hear about. Because I know he wouldn't ask. He wouldn't listen. He sips his coffee, then places the cup down with a soft clink. His voice is calm, but I feel the blade beneath it. "You know, Wes, sometimes I wonder what you're doing with your life." He leans back slightly. "Brandon's achieved so much. Pulling in 6 figures a month. Building something real. And you're still there. In the barracks. Living a life I don't understand." I grip my fork a little tighter, but I keep my voice even. "I like my work." He scoffs, shaking his head with quiet disbelief. "Work? That's not work, Wes. That's a hobby. One day you'll realize what real responsibility is. When you do, just tell me. I'll arrange a good position for you at the company." My stomach clenches. I look at him, the man who used to speak about principles, about standing tall, about doing what's right even when it's hard, and now here he is, telling me my life's work is a hobby. Across the table, my mother watches us both, her hands in her lap. Finally, she speaks, her voice barely audible. "James, enough. Wes has his own path." But my father waves her off. "Helen, you don't understand. Wes has potential, but he's wasting it. He's not like Brandon." Those words hit like a knife. I straighten, placing my fork down with deliberate calm. My voice doesn't betray the sting. "I'm full. Thank you, Mom." I stand and walk away from the table. I can feel my father's gaze pressing into my back, sharp and unforgiving, but I don't turn around. I won't let him see my eyes that sting, not with weakness, but with the quiet grief of being unseen. That afternoon, I decide to visit Brandon. Maybe I was chasing something, some piece of the brotherhood we once had, some memory of when we were boys playing catch in the garden. Maybe I just wanted to say congratulations without the weight of judgment. His office is in a sleek downtown skyscraper, 40 floors up, all glass and gleaming steel. The city stretches far beyond the windows, buzzing with ambition and money. I find him behind a polished desk, sleeves rolled to the elbows of a tailored gray suit, his eyes fixed on a financial chart pulsing on a curved monitor. He looks up, surprised, but recovers quickly. "Wesley, didn't expect you," he says, rising and offering his hand. I shake it, but the gesture feels clinical, like we're strangers playing a part. "Congratulations," I say, taking a seat across from him. "The wedding was great." Brandon leans back in his chair, a grin spreading across his face. "Thanks. Aaron and I planned it for a year. Cost a fortune, but worth it." He tilts his head slightly, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "And you? Still in the military?" That question again. Like a reflex. Like they all ask it not to know the answer, but to remind me of my place. I nod. "Yeah, still there." He laughs, but the sound is hollow, too polished. "You're one of a kind, Wesley. Dad's right, you could do so much more. But you choose to stay there. Why?" Like the hero vibe. I stare at him. My little brother. The kid who used to run behind me barefoot in the yard, shouting my name, begging me to show him how to throw a perfect spiral. Now he sits behind a desk worth more than my Jeep, looking at me like I'm a fool in a costume. "I like my work," I say. "Even. Steady." Brandon shrugs. "Suit yourself. But you know the world runs on money and power. The military doesn't give you that. If you change your mind, let me know. I can get you a position. Nothing fancy, but enough to start over." I smile. Tight. Controlled. But inside, something burns. I don't need his position. I don't need his favor. And I sure as hell don't need his pity. In a week, he'll see me again, not here, not like this. He'll see me in my Major General's uniform, seated at the head of the meeting table, my name and rank commanding the room. And when Project Helios is laid out in that conference, and the future of Nixora Dynamics hinges on the approval of one man he'll know. I stand. "Thanks," I say, "wishing you happiness." I leave without waiting for a reply. The elevator hums softly as it carries me down, past floors of finance, power, ego. And when I step out onto the street, the city feels different, brighter, colder, sharper. But the real weight is inside me. Not from Brandon's words. Not really. But because the truth has settled like a stone in my chest. My family, the one I loved, the one I fought for, they're not the same. They don't see me. They don't want to see me. I close my eyes for a moment, let the wind wash over me, and whisper to myself, "One more week. Everything will change." That evening, when I returned to the estate, the driveway was already lined with luxury cars, headlights catching the last blush of sunset. I knew what that meant: guests. More of my father's friends. Wealthy businessmen. High society types. I had no intention of staying downstairs. My plan was to head straight to my room, avoid the wine-soaked pleasantries, and pack in peace. But just as I started for the stairs, my mother's voice floated out from the living room. "Wesley, come in. Meet everyone," she called, her tone light and cheerful, as if everything were fine, as if the last few days hadn't been quietly suffocating. I hesitated, then walked in. The living room was full, crystal glasses in hand, silk dresses brushing against leather armchairs. The lighting was warm, low, calculated. Conversations hummed in soft, polished tones. A few heads turned as I entered. My father stood by the fireplace, a drink in hand, his laughter already mid-story. He noticed me and gestured lazily. "This is Wesley," he said, the introduction so casual it felt like an afterthought. "My eldest son. He's serving in the military." There was no pride in his voice, no weight behind the words. A man seated beside him, a round-faced fellow in a navy blazer, likely one of his golfing friends, let out a laugh that echoed through the room. "The military? Really? You didn't want to work with your dad?" he asked, raising an eyebrow like I'd just confessed to joining a circus. "Nixora Dynamics is dominating the market," he added with a self-satisfied grin. Chuckles followed. The kind that coat themselves in velvet, but slice underneath. I smiled politely. I like my work. But they didn't stop. A woman with glittering pearl earrings leaned in from the sofa. "Oh, what a pity," she said with mock sympathy. "With Brooks jeans, you should be a billionaire by now." More laughter. Someone clinked their glass. Then my father, sipping his wine, chimed in with a dry chuckle. "Exactly. But Wesley, he wants to be a lowly soldier. I don't know what he's thinking." The room erupted. I stood there, each word a stone against my chest. They didn't know. None of them knew. I could have told them. Could have shut down every laugh with a single sentence. But I didn't. I simply nodded, murmured "excuse me," and left the room. Upstairs, I closed the bedroom door behind me and sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding. My hands were steady, but my breath was shallow. I lay back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Their laughter still echoed in my head. I clenched my jaw and whispered to the silence. One more week. One more week, and they'd see. After 3 days in that house, I began to pack. The silence between me and my father grew thicker by the hour. When I zipped up my bag and made my way downstairs, he was waiting by the door. He extended his hand. His grip was firm. "If you change your mind, just call me," he said evenly. "Nixora Dynamics always has a place for you." I nodded. Not a word. I didn't need his place. I'd built my own. And in 1 week, he would see. I returned to my apartment just outside D.C., a modest place near the Pentagon. White walls, an old wooden desk, a bookshelf crowded with files and binders marked with red stripes and acronyms the public never hears about. I set down my bag and got to work checking emails, sorting through the classified material for the meeting. I wasn't nervous. I'd faced world leaders, sat across from generals with eyes like stone, made calls that determined the fate of thousands. But this time was different. This time, it was personal. This time, I would face my father and brother across a gleaming table, not as a son, not as a sibling, but as Major General Wesley Brooks, the man who held the fate of their biggest project in his hands. The day before the meeting, I drove to the base, checked in, and walked the long, familiar halls. The place had its own kind of rhythm, boots hitting tile, radios hissing faintly, the low murmur of people who carry the world's weight without needing applause. As I sat in my office, the door creaked open. Colonel Jacob stepped in, a stack of documents balanced in his arms. "Major General, the final report on Project Helios," Colonel Jacob said, setting the thick folder on my desk. His voice was steady, respectful. I nodded, flipping through the pages with trained efficiency. "Thank you, Jacob. Anything unusual?" He shook his head. "No, sir. But Nixora Dynamics seems to be struggling with their cost structure. There are some unclear expenses, nothing overt, but it caught the audit team's eye." I frowned. My eyes drifted over a section marked Auxiliary Financials. It didn't add up. Brandon had overseen the financials on this contract. If there were errors, intentional or not, they fell squarely on him. "I see," I said, tapping the page with my pen. "Keep this quiet. I'll handle it at the meeting." "Yes, sir," he replied, saluting crisply before leaving the room. That night, I didn't sleep much. By dawn, I stood in front of the mirror in full dress uniform. Deep blue wool, silver trim, sharply creased pants. The rows of ribbons on my chest shimmered under the light, my insignia catching like a glint of steel. My name was stitched in dark lettering, Brooks. Above it, my rank, Major General, U.S. Army. I didn't wear this to boast. I wore it because it was me. It was the 10 years they called a waste. The years I bled, rose, endured. The years they erased. I stepped into the car waiting outside. The driver saluted, then started the engine. As we moved through the city streets, towers of glass and steel rose on either side. My thoughts didn't stray far. I thought of my father's smirk, of Brandon's patronizing grin, of their friends laughing. One more meeting. When the car pulled up in front of Nixora Dynamics headquarters, a polished monument to wealth and ambition, I sat still for a beat, staring at the building. It was as sleek and towering as they thought they were. I exhaled, then stepped out. Inside, the lobby gleamed with brushed chrome and marble. Employees moved briskly, dressed sharp, eyes trained. But when they saw me, saw the uniform, they slowed, stared, whispered. "Major General Brooks, this way please," said a young assistant, her voice quiet with a mix of nerves and awe. I followed her through corridors of glass and steel, past rows of workstations where faces turned as I walked by. I felt the weight of their curiosity. They didn't recognize me. Not really, but they recognized rank. The top floor boardroom was massive. All luxury floor-to-ceiling windows. A black ebony table that stretched from one end to the other. Power radiated here, and they all fed off it like light. At the far end, my father sat in a tailored gray suit, speaking quietly with two executives. He hadn't seen me yet. Brandon was next to him, scrolling through his tablet, jaw tight, focused but comfortable. Raymond Carter stood at the head of the table. His hair was gray now, his frame leaner, but the moment he turned and saw me, his face lit up. "Wesley," he said, stepping forward. "Good to see you." "Raymond," I replied, and offered my hand. His grip was firm, genuine. Raymond had known me years ago. During a NATO operation in Brussels, we had shared long nights decoding cyber threats and protecting military infrastructure. He wasn't just an executive, he knew the stakes. I took my seat at the long table. The room shifted. The buzz of small talk dulled. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my father glance up. His eyes widened. A flicker surprise, discomfort, something unguarded flashed across his face before he turned quickly away, jaw tight. Brandon saw me next. His brows drew together. He leaned over to whisper something to the executive next to him. Confusion, possibly concern. I imagined his mind running circles, trying to figure out what I was doing here in that uniform. Let them wonder. I said nothing. I placed the Project Helios folder on the table in front of me and waited. Raymond raised his hand, tapping the table lightly. Conversation stopped. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice smooth and commanding. We're here today to discuss Project Helios, a critical defense contract with the Department of Defense. We've been working toward this for a long time. He paused, then turned toward me with a smile of genuine respect. And I'm honored to introduce the representative from the military, the one with final approval authority for this project. He turned to the room. Major General Wesley J. Brooks, Director of Cyber Strategy Integration and Defense Relations, U.S. Army Cyber Command. The room fell silent. I felt every pair of eyes in the room lock onto me, sharp, focused, like invisible bullets trained on my chest. My father's hand froze, his coffee cup midway to his lips. Brandon jerked around in his chair, mouth slightly open, eyes wide in disbelief. The executives whispered to one another, some hastily flipping through their briefing packets, as if trying to confirm that the name in the documents really matched the uniformed man now sitting at the head of their table. I sat tall, shoulders square, eyes steady. I met Raymond's gaze and gave a small, professional nod. Thank you, Mr. Carter, I said, my voice even, resolute. I'm ready to begin. There was a pause. My father cleared his throat, his voice brittle and uncertain. Wesley, he said, struggling to keep composure. You're a major general? I turned my eyes to him. Yes, sir, I said, plain and firm. Nothing more, nothing less. Brandon shook his head in disbelief. No way, he muttered under his breath, almost like a reflex. Before anyone else could speak, Raymond stepped in, his tone clipped and commanding, like a man restoring order. Major General Brooks is one of the world's leading cybersecurity experts. We're fortunate to have him here today. His words landed like thunder. My heart pounded, not from nerves, not from pressure. I was used to both. This was different. This was the sound of 2 decades collapsing into a single moment. A strange satisfaction rose in me, not triumphant, not smug, just quiet. Quiet and full of ache. This moment, this seat, this uniform, this was what it took for them to see me. Why? Why now? Why did I have to stand here in a starched uniform, my chest weighed down with medals, for them to recognize I was never less than Brandon, never less than worthy? The whispers in the room faded as the focus shifted to me. I could feel it, the shift in the atmosphere, the gravity I now carried. And I let it settle. I didn't flinch. I had work to do. I set the Project Helios folder down with purpose and looked across the boardroom at suits that cost more than a soldier's salary, at assistants hunched over notepads, scribbling every word I said. I saw my father, still frozen, still silent. His jaw was tight, his hands gripping a pen like it was the only anchor in the room. And Brandon, his collar stiff, his fingers twitching at his tie, looked like he was holding his breath. His eyes darted to our father, maybe searching for instruction or a lifeline. None came. I cleared my throat and began. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice carrying across the room. Project Helios is not merely a tech venture. It is the digital shield that will stand between our national infrastructure and foreign cyber aggression. It is the backbone of our defense. And every aspect from codebase to cost must meet the highest standards of scrutiny. I let that hang in the air a moment. I need Nixora Dynamics to provide full clarity on 2 fronts, your cybersecurity protocol and your financial framework. I expect transparency. Today, my gaze found Brandon. I didn't blink. He blinked first. Major General, he began, his voice cracking slightly, the confidence in his tone forced and paper thin. We've optimized the cost structure for maximum efficiency. All expenses are fully reported. He slid a stack of documents toward me, the pages perfectly aligned, but I noticed it. The hesitation, the tremble in his fingers. Brandon always had a confident touch, the kind that came from privilege and praise. But now, under my scrutiny, even his hands betrayed him. I took the folder without a word, flipped through the sheets methodically. My eyes skimmed the numbers, but I didn't need to read them. I already knew what they said. Colonel Jacobs' report was etched into my mind like every piece of intel I'd ever processed in war zones. The $47 million expenditure for the Singapore subsidiary, I said evenly, not looking up. It's not clearly justified. I paused, then raised my gaze, locking it onto Brandon. Can you elaborate on its purpose? He froze. The silence in the room was sharp and total. The kind of silence that stretches long enough to make a man sweat. I wasn't his brother at that moment. I was the man with the authority to sink their biggest contract. Brandon swallowed, his Adam's apple jerking. He flipped back a few pages, frantically scanning for something, anything that might save him. It's an investment, he stammered, for auxiliary research. His voice cracked at the edges, like brittle glass. Auxiliary research, I repeated, raising an eyebrow. I tapped the folder with a gloved finger. Do you have a detailed report on the outcomes of this research? Because according to our military data, that subsidiary hasn't conducted any Helios-related work in the last 2 years. I slid a document across the table toward him. The same analysis Colonel Jacob had compiled, annotated, time-stamped, irrefutable. His name was right there on the cover. His failure in print. Brandon paled. The room shifted in discomfort. An executive nearby coughed into his hand, a useless attempt to defuse the rising tension. My father finally looked up. I saw his eyes flicker between me and Brandon, his lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see what lived in his expression. I didn't want shame or regret or disbelief. I had a job to do, just like I always had. Major General. A voice spoke, breaking the silence. Eleanor Harper. Sharp. Experienced. Careful. She leaned forward slightly, her expression composed but wary. We'll review this expenditure and provide a full report. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. I nodded, keeping my tone even. I expect that report within 48 hours. National security, I said slowly, letting each word land, doesn't tolerate misunderstandings. The room tensed again, but I didn't stop. I shifted gears, my voice cool, efficient. I pressed into the technical side next. Let's review the security protocol. I want the encryption structure and source code presented in full. A man from Nora's engineering team opened his laptop, projecting diagrams and flowcharts onto the screen. I stood, walked toward it, pointing out a subtle but catastrophic vulnerability in the encryption stack. If this flaw is exploited, I said, turning slowly, an enemy can breach your network in under 4 hours. Once in, they could disable communications, reroute missile systems, and erase audit trails before you even know they're there. The engineers nodded, visibly shaken. One woman scribbled notes so fast her pen nearly tore the page. A man beside her muttered something about deploying remediation tonight. Good, I said. I need a full plan of action within the next 24 hours. Brandon hadn't spoken again. He sat still, his eyes fixed on the table, a muscle in his jaw twitching. His silence was louder than words. Then, finally, my father spoke. It was almost a whisper, like saying it hurt. Wesley, he caught himself, corrected, Major General. The words came with difficulty. We'll ensure everything is addressed. Nixora Dynamics is fully committed to working with the Department of Defense. I looked at him finally, and for the first time since walking into that room, met his eyes. I trust that commitment. Mr. Brooks, I said, keeping my tone measured. But the weight of the moment pressed deep into my chest. Hearing him call me Major General in front of this room, this world he had always ruled, was a moment I never thought I'd have. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like recognition. And still it didn't undo everything. The meeting stretched on for 3 hours. I ran it with discipline, with clarity, with the practiced precision of command. Every question I asked, every directive I gave, was aimed at strengthening the project, not dismantling it. Because that was who I was. I wasn't there to humiliate. I wasn't there to punish. I wasn't there to settle scores with my father or Brandon. I was here to do what was right. Not for revenge. Not for applause. Just for the mission, just like my father once taught me, back when I was a boy sitting at his desk, watching him solve problems with discipline and pride. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten that lesson. Or maybe he'd just stopped believing I was the kind of man who could learn it. As the meeting ended, the executive stood and began shaking my hand, one after another. Their grips were firmer than when I'd entered, their smiles real, now not the polite ones given to a stranger. Impressive, I heard one whisper to another. Didn't know Brooks's son was a Major General. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I gathered my documents with calm precision. My role here was done. The mission parameters had been met. Still, inside, I just wanted to leave. The stares, the whispered acknowledgments, even the respect, it all felt heavy. Too late. Too loud. As I turned to go, Raymond Carter stepped over and placed a hand gently on my shoulder. You did great, Wesley, he said, his voice warm, personal. I always knew you were special. I managed a small smile for him, but it felt hollow. I wasn't basking in any triumph. I just wanted to breathe. My father and Brandon didn't leave with the others. They lingered at the far end of the room, stiff, uncertain. I knew they wanted to speak. I could feel it in the way they hovered, like they didn't know how to step forward. I wasn't sure I was ready either. I stepped into the hallway, the cool draft from the tall windows brushing against my skin. It was a moment of relief, of solitude, brief and necessary. An assistant hurried up behind me, holding a glass of water. Major General, she said gently, Mr. Carter invites you to his private office for further discussion. I nodded. I already knew what was coming. This wasn't about reports or strategy. It was personal. It was overdue. Raymond's office was at the corner of the building. The city sprawled beyond the glass walls, silver towers, busy streets, everything humming far below. Inside the room, waiting for me, were the three people who once made up my entire world. My father, Brandon, and my mother. Raymond gave me a soft, knowing look. "I'll let your family talk," he said before slipping out and closing the door. Silence fell. I stood in full uniform, the medals, the stars, the weight of it all clinging to me. My father sat stiffly in a leather chair, eyes shadowed with a dozen emotions: surprise, regret, something that looked like shame. My mother was on the couch, her eyes red, her hands trembling as she held a tissue. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me, like she was trying to reconcile the boy she'd kissed goodbye years ago with the man standing here now. Brandon was by the window, staring out at the skyline, his reflection ghosted in the glass. He didn't look back. Then, finally, my father spoke. His voice was low, uncertain. "Wesley." He paused. "Tried again. Why didn't you say anything about this?" He gestured vaguely at my chest, at the uniform, at the insignia he once told me were fancy Boy Scout badges. I held his gaze. The emotions swelled in my throat, but I pressed them down, kept my voice even. "I did, Dad," I said quietly. "I sent invitations to my promotion ceremonies. I emailed about Sentinel Fire, the NATO medal. I sent pictures when I was honored. My voice nearly cracked. I swallowed it back. No one replied. No one asked. My mother let out a choked sob, covering her mouth. "Wesley," she whispered. "I didn't know. I thought you were just doing office work. In the military." Her voice broke completely. "I didn't understand what you do. I wanted to walk over, to hold her, tell her it was okay. But I couldn't. Not yet." I stayed where I was, rigid, guarded. Brandon turned slowly from the window, hands still in his pockets. "Wesley, Major General." He corrected himself, the words awkward but genuine. "I was wrong." He looked down. "I mocked you. I thought you weren't good enough, that you weren't serious." He met my eyes finally. "You deserve respect." I studied him, saw the shame in his face. I remembered the laughter, the jabs, the way he'd always treated me like the family disappointment. A part of me wanted to forgive him right there, go back to the days when we were brothers, really brothers. But another part still ached, and that part wasn't ready. Then my father stood. The man who used to be larger than life to me, who now looked a little smaller, like he'd aged in the last few minutes. "Wesley," he said again, quieter this time. "I thought you needed me to guide you. I thought you were wasting your potential." He paused. "I was wrong." He paused, as if the words were foreign on his tongue. "I'm proud of you." 10 years. That was how long I'd waited to hear those 4 words from my father. And even now, even with the uniform on my chest and the medals gleaming under office lights, they didn't land the way I'd always imagined. They weren't triumphant. They weren't redemptive. They just hurt a little less than the silence that had come before them. I looked at him, feeling a flicker of warmth mixed with an ache I didn't know how to name. "I just wanted to be respected for the path I chose," I said, my voice low, steady. "Not because I rejected yours." My father nodded slowly. His eyes were glassy, distant, like he was sifting through memories or guilt. "You're right," he said quietly. "I didn't see you." He looked down, as if ashamed of the truth finally spoken. "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. I couldn't not without letting the crack show. I just nodded, turned away. My heart felt heavy, like it had run a marathon carrying a lifetime of silence. I hadn't come here to win. I wasn't here for retribution or guilt. I just wanted them to see me. Truly see me, not through the lens of money or position or reputation. Not compared to the son they expected me to be. Just as me. I left the office and stepped into the hallway. Sunlight streamed in through the tall windows, catching on the medals at my chest. It warmed my face, and for a brief second, I closed my eyes. A week ago, I was just the soldier. The afterthought. The disappointment. Today, I was Major General Wesley Brooks, the man who had silenced a boardroom, redirected a billion-dollar project, and forced Nexera Dynamics to take accountability. But deep down, I was still just Wes. The son. The brother. The man who still, in some quiet place in his heart, wanted his family to understand him, not because of his rank, but in spite of it. Back at my apartment near the Pentagon, the stillness of the small space wrapped around me like a familiar blanket. I took off my uniform with practiced ease and hung it on the rack, letting its weight lift off my shoulders. But the heaviness in my chest stayed. At my desk, I opened my laptop. A dozen emails blinked in the inbox, but I went straight to the one from Colonel Jacob, an update on Project Helios. The numbers confirmed what I suspected. Brandon's cost structure had gaps. Not fraudulent, just careless. Negligent. The kind of mistakes that wouldn't just cost money, but potentially lives if exploited. I sat with it for a few minutes, the cursor blinking in an empty reply window. Then I began typing, the words measured and clear. "Raymond, the report confirms multiple oversights in the financial structure. While there is no sign of fraud, the current management leaves critical vulnerabilities. This isn't intentional, but it needs immediate correction to ensure national security. Please act swiftly before the Pentagon is forced to intervene. I hit send, then leaned back in my chair, exhaling a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It wasn't about saving face or throwing blame. It was about doing the right thing. I hadn't exposed Brandon. I'd given him a chance to fix what he'd broken. The days that followed pulled me back into the rhythm of cyber command. Lines of code, classified briefings, darkroom strategies to protect networks I couldn't even name aloud. The grind kept my mind sharp, my hands busy. But the faces stayed with me. My mother, her voice cracking. My father, finally faltering. Brandon, silent and stunned as I confronted his numbers with the facts. A week after the meeting, an email from Brandon appeared in my inbox. The subject line was just, "Thanks." I opened it slowly, unsure what I expected. What I found was something I hadn't seen from him in years: humility. "Wesley, I've reviewed the entire cost structure for Helios, as you requested. There were things I didn't handle well, and I'm fixing them. Thank you for not making a big deal out of it. I was wrong to underestimate you. If you have time, I'd like to meet just us brothers." I read it once. Then again. A quiet warmth crept into my chest, small, tentative, but real. I replied simply, "Good. I'm free this weekend. Let's meet at the old coffee shop." It was the small cafe tucked between the bookstore and the park in the suburbs, nothing fancy, just worn chairs and faded wallpaper, but to us, it was sacred ground. We used to sit there for hours as kids, huddled in that same back corner, trading naive dreams about building robots, starting a tech company, even flying planes one day. Brandon replied to my message almost instantly, "Saturday. Same time as always." I stared at the screen for a few seconds before putting the phone down. I felt a flicker of something, hope maybe, but I kept it caged. Caution had become second nature. Still, part of me wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could bridge the silence that had stretched so far and for so long. That weekend, I kept it simple. Shirt and jeans. No uniform. No medals. I wasn't walking in as Major General Brooks. I was just Wes's older brother. When I stepped into the cafe, the smell of espresso and warm bread hit me like a memory. Brandon was already there, sitting in our old spot, his fingers wrapped around a latte. He stood as soon as he saw me, offering a small, genuine smile, the first one I'd seen from him in years. "Wesley," he said softly, like he wasn't sure if he had the right to say my name. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. "You're buying, right?" He laughed, the sound awkward but real. "Least I can do." We talked. At first, it was light work, the weather, Aaron's new job. It was stiff, cautious, like two men walking through a minefield neither wanted to admit was there. Then Brandon set his cup down, leaned forward, and looked me in the eye. "Wesley, I'm sorry," he said. His voice didn't shake, but there was weight in it. "I thought you weren't good enough. That you were playing soldier. I didn't know what you actually did. I didn't want to know." I let my arrogance blind me. I met his gaze and held it. There was no anger in his eyes, no defensiveness, just shame and something deeper. "Regret." "It's okay, Brandon," I said quietly. "I don't need you to be proud of me. I just want you to respect the path I chose." He nodded, took a slow sip of coffee. "I've fixed the cost plan," he said. "Raymond says it's much tighter now. I triple-checked everything. And I learned a lesson. Not just about money, but about responsibility." I smiled. Not the kind of smile you give in meetings or to strangers, but something genuine. "Good. You're smart, Brandon. You always were. You'll do better." We kept talking, slipping into stories from our childhood, those dumb fights over who got the last piece of cake, the ridiculous business plan we once drew up to sell robot lawnmowers to neighbors. For a moment, it was easy, natural. When we finally stood to leave, the sun was dipping low behind the trees outside. We stepped into the light together. I felt something shift. A piece of the distance between us, not all of it, but a piece had closed. Maybe not enough to call it a full reconciliation, but enough to believe we could be real brothers again. A few days later, I was going through morning reports when an email from my father landed in my inbox. The sender, Edward Brooks. The subject, internal memo, Project Helios. I clicked it open, expecting some formality, a typical executive summary. But what I found stopped me cold. "Dear Nexera Dynamics team, I want to share something I've recently realized. My son, Major General Wesley Brooks, is an exceptional man, a leader in cybersecurity, and a source of pride for our family. I underestimated him, and I apologize for that. We are fortunate to have him supporting Project Helios, and I hope we all learn from his integrity." I blinked hard, the words blurring at the edges. It wasn't just an apology. It was public, deliberate, directed not just to me, but to every executive, engineer, and assistant in the company. My father hadn't just acknowledged me, he'd admitted he was wrong in front of everyone. My hand hovered for a moment before I picked up my phone and called him. He answered before the first ring finished. "Wesley," he said, his voice warmer than I remembered. Familiar in a way that made something in me loosen. "I got the email," I said. There was a pause. "Did it mean something to you?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yes, Dad. Thank you." He was silent for a moment. Then he exhaled, the sound low, like he'd been waiting for this for years. "I was wrong," he said. "I didn't see you. I want to make it right. When you're free, come home, okay? Your mom misses you." I smiled, feeling a burden I hadn't realized I still carried begin to lift. "I'll come, Dad," I said, my voice quiet but certain. Soon. 6 months passed before I finally returned to the estate. It wasn't hesitation that kept me, it was life. Work, duty, the constant pull of responsibility. But deep down, I needed the time. Time to believe the change was real. Time to trust it. As I stepped through the front door, something felt different. Lighter. Warmer. Before I could even take my jacket off, my mother rushed toward me, wrapping her arms around me like she used to when I was a kid. "Wesley," she said, beaming, her voice brimming with joy. "I made apple pie for you." I laughed, hugging her back tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume, lavender and old pages. My father stood a few feet behind her, watching. He extended his hand, and this time, the grip wasn't stiff or formal. It was warm, steady. "Good to see you, Wesley," he said, nodding once. But his eyes said more than the words ever could. Brandon was there too, standing beside Aaron, who waved from the living room. He clapped my shoulder, grinning. "No meetings this time, Wesley," he said. "Just family." We sat in the living room, and as I took a seat, my eyes wandered to the wall across from the fireplace. At first, I thought something was out of place, but then I saw it. There, between my father's old Forbes magazine cover and Brandon's framed MBA diploma from Stanford, hung a new photo, one of me in uniform, receiving my NATO medal. It wasn't large or flashy, but it stood proudly, the frame polished and new. I stood, walking toward it slowly. My throat tightened. "Who hung this?" I asked. My mother smiled gently. "Your father did." He nodded, stepping forward. "It's time our home was proud of all our children." My chest tightened. I couldn't speak right away. I just looked at him and nodded, and that was enough. That dinner was the first in years where I felt at home. We laughed, told old stories, and for the first time, they asked about my work not out of politeness, but out of genuine interest. My mother leaned forward, eyes bright. "So, Wesley, the military AI program you're overseeing," she tilted her head. "Is it like in those sci-fi movies? Robots that talk and stuff?" I chuckled. "Not quite. It's more like training neural systems to recognize cyber threats. Think less Terminator, more digital brain with a mission." She smiled and nodded, probably understanding half of what I said, but fully absorbing the pride in my voice. My father chimed in next. "Tell me about Operation Sentinel Fire." I heard some talk, but never understood the scope. I took a breath and explained, not in jargon or acronyms, but in clear terms. And for the first time, he didn't cut in or change the subject. He listened, really listened. Then Brandon spoke, surprising me. "By the way," he said, finishing a bite of pie, "I applied that encryption model you told me about. The one from your Cyber Command playbook." He paused, shaking his head with a grin. "It worked better than I expected." He looked at me, sincere. "You're a genius." I laughed, shaking my head. "I'll take that from the guy with the Stanford diploma." As dinner wound down, I stepped out into the garden, the moonlight casting soft silver lines across the lawn and the pool shimmering quietly in the distance. I heard the door open behind me, and soon felt a light jacket drape over my shoulders. "It's chilly, Wesley," my mother said, smiling up at me as she adjusted the collar. "Thanks, Mom," I said softly. She looked at me then, her eyes kind and full. "I'm proud of you," she said, voice steady but tender. "Not because you're a major general, but because you're my son." My throat tightened, and I looked away, then back at her. "I know, Mom," I said. "Thank you." A quiet stillness settled over us, and for the first time in years, I felt a piece of myself return. Not the soldier, not the strategist, just, well, my family wasn't perfect. We'd lost years. There were scars still healing, but we were trying. That mattered. A few days later, I returned to my rhythm briefings, secure calls, endless lines of code. I unpacked my suitcase in my office, the familiar hum of monitors surrounding me. As I lifted my uniform from the bottom of the bag, something slipped out from beneath it. A folded piece of paper. My name in delicate cursive. It was my mother's handwriting. "Wesley, I'm proud of you. Not because you're a major general, but because you're my son. Love you." I smiled, placing the letter beside my NATO medal on the desk. It didn't shine like the ribbon brass, but it held a different kind of weight. In that quiet moment, I felt something shift inside me, a spark of peace, of hope. My family was learning to see me, and I was learning to let go of the past and live for the brighter days ahead. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.